Okay, so we're here with Kahlua, Sophie, and
Rummer.
The alcoholic dog names. All right, so Sophie is the one that we're primarily here to work with. She's wearing a muzzle, as we talked about in the other video. We kind of just got done sitting down and going over the introductory evaluation period. Now, Sophie is actually displaying really good behavior, except for she's staring at me, which to a dog, in the dog world, is kind of a challenge to be direct eye contact for extended periods of times. And she's been staring at me pretty much the whole time she's here. However, she has sat, she has laid down. If we want to look at her right now, see how her ear, right ear, as you're looking at the camera, on as you're looking at her at home, on her left ear, is kind of backwards, and you can see the inside of it is facing forward. Now it kind of oscillates a little bit. So for dogs, we want to, and we can keep it on her, so we can kind of talk about some body language and things to work on, because one of the things that you're worried about is obviously her nipping. She has a bite history, and so we want to make sure we know what to watch for. So one of the very first things we want to look at is her energy level. Her energy level is very nice right now. She's calm. She's not breathing heavy. She's not bouncing around the room. She's not swiveling her head around. This is the energy that you want to have when you're going to introduce somebody to her. Now, when you bring someone into the house, obviously that escalates things. So we're going to go through off camera some exercises and techniques to help her learn to control herself and maintain a more calm, balanced energy like she has now. So let's talk about right now about some body language. So number one, the very first warning that most dogs give, and it's not always in this order, but usually the first thing they do is they stare. They stare oftentimes with a lowered head. Now her ears are back right now, and see how they're forward now? Forward is more confident, assertive. It could also be dominant, territorial, or aggressive. So if you see the dog's ears forward and the dog is staring with a lowered head, that combination of communications is really what I look for. Staring by itself, I'm going to keep my eye on a dog because that's usually a warning. Number two, but if I start seeing staring with the hackles up and the tail's elevated and the ears are forward and the dog is not breathing, that's a pretty loud conversation. Most people don't see it. Most people think it came out of nowhere. The dog just bit for no reason whatsoever. Well, the dog probably communicated several times. So one of the things that, if somebody comes up to us and is going to grab us, and you can film me, I guess. So it comes up, and that's all right, and wants to grab us or grab me on the street, and I don't know who they are, and they're kind of coming up to me like this. I'm going to say, hey, man, back off. If they continue, I'm going to probably raise my voice. If they continue, I might turn sideways. If they continue, I might hold my arm out to keep them away. If they continue, I might push at them. I might end up getting physical with them because they're not hearing what I'm saying. What a lot of people do with dogs is the dog communicates. It says, hey, man, you're making me feel uncomfortable. You're still making me feel uncomfortable. Now you're taking my space and invading my space. You're moving around in a way that I'm uncomfortable. And the dog is kind of going through all these different things to communicate, I'm uncomfortable, and the human doesn't listen. Well, now I have to go to a bite. Just like us, we have to go to physicality if somebody doesn't listen. Now, we would prefer the dog to move away, and that's kind of one of the things we're going to try to accomplish during the session. But to sum up this video real quick, let's look at back at Sophie. So when you see her staring, especially with a lowered head, that's a warning. If you see her ears rotate forward, also another warning. If you see the hair on her back here, and usually it's along the spine and sometimes on the butt, raise up, that's also a warning. Now, I just did a bad thing. I reached over her. You don't want to reach over a dog that's aggressive or insecure. That can, just like us, if a giant hand goes over us, we're going to kind of cower down and look to see what's going on. Other things she could do, she could hold her breath, or she could breathe very fast. A lot of times they kind of appropriate a frozen stance, and it looks like they're just like they're playing statue. If they do it like that, it looks like they're in the middle. That's even louder communication. Hey, I'm really uncomfortable. I'm so uncomfortable, I stop moving so I can give you my full attention. So to a dog, that's a big warning. Licking the lips is a sign of stress. Dilated pupils is a sign of anxiousness or excitability. The tail, a lot of people think the tail wagging means happy. If the tail is up, that can be more assertive. It could be also be a dominant. It could be aggressive. Just because the tail's up, I'm not going to freak out on my dog. But if I start seeing a combination of these things, that's when I'm going to make sure that I redirect the dog at that point. If you can, just like us, if we're going to talk about Donald Trump, whether we hate him or love him, he has a very polarizing figure. People get very passionate when they're discussing it, and it escalates very quickly. But if you sit down and you're like, oh man, I can't believe that Trump said this, and the other person agrees or disagrees, and they start to get into it, and your mom or somebody, the host says, hey, I want this to be a nice, civil dinner. I don't want us to talk about politics, but thinking about people like that's fine. If they continued their argument for a couple minutes, then the host tries to interrupt. Now I've made my point, I'm countering a point. We start getting worked up. It's harder for us to settle down. Same thing for dogs. If we can disagree with them at the first sign, it's much easier to get them to relax than it is if we wait until they're barking and lunging and growling. By that point, we've waited way too long. So those are some of the warning signs we want to look out for when we have a dog that's reactive towards other people or animals.